In 1985, the General Secretary of Vietnam wrote a letter to the Soviet Union seeking assistance. Moscow replied with 4 words to tighten its belt. Vietnam replied with 4 words, please give the belt. The inflation rate in Vietnam, that year it skyrocketed to an astounding 775% per capita. GDP fell to a mere $319 bottom. In Asia it's poorer than Bangladesh, which is a disaster-stricken country. This was in the jungle. Put the French and Americans, the country of steel, that has been brought down one after another. Now we are facing an enemy more formidable than guns. Total collapse of the economy. Welcome back to the world, reorganizing the life and death of 80 nations, reading 80 years after World War II. I am the reader Yang Guo. Today, we turn to episode 57, look in the jungles of Indochina, the country that put down the AK-47 and picked up the sewing machine after Vietnam was forced to the edge of the kingdom. How he smashed the old calendar, turned between cracks, and squeezed into the global supply chain. Table maker, the first Chien Hu opening and the suicide trade in 1975 on paper. Vietnam, which has just completed the reunification of North and South, and this is an absolutely fantastic hand. Demographic dividend, it has a population of 50 million. And after a long war, the demographic structure is characterized by extreme youth. The resource-rich coastline is 3,260 kilometers long. There's coal in the north, there's iron in the middle, oil in the south. Mekong Delta. It is one of the most fertile breadbasket regions in Asia. Even rare earth reserves rank among the top in the world. The business base of Ho Chi Minh City in the south, the original Saigon, was known as the Little Paris of the East. Business boom, 1.50 million Chinese, overseas Chinese, managed there with a mature appearance and light industrial chains, even more dynamic than its contemporaries in Hong Kong. It stands to reason that as long as you settle down and engage in construction, sure win. But just came out of the war. Hanoi, decision-making level driven by extremely inflated self-confidence, played a series of mysterious operations that could be called suicide. The first step is to destroy the southern business ecosystem. After reunification, Vietnam was simple and crude. Rigid Soviet model copied. 80% of the land was forcibly collectivized. 90% of enterprises were forcibly nationalized in just a few years. Millions could have been used for economic construction. The backbone of South Vietnamese capitalists, intellectuals and skilled workers are in exile. The factory became a rusty shell. The second step is the leap forward of heavy industry that violates the law in an agricultural country that doesn't even have food and clothing, trying to build on poverty and poverty. Forcibly launched large steel mills and chemical plants. The result is obvious. Heavy industry failed to take off. Light industry comes to a complete standstill. Even eating has become a problem. Vietnam has the most fertile delta in Asia. Every year it needs to be imported from abroad millions of tons of food to help disaster victims. The third step is the endless war of overdraft. This is the most lethal step. After decades of resistance to France and the United States, Vietnam is not only not recuperating, instead, it was carried away by regional hegemony. They are trapped in the quagmire of Cambodian soldiers, at the same time on the northern border with former benefactor China. A prolonged, armed conflict broke out in the early 1980s. Vietnam's military spending was at its peak. It has swallowed up 50% of the national budget. The average household's income, half were taken away by the state to raise soldiers. The other half can't support a whole family at all. If you don't have money in your pocket, you can only ask the Soviet Union for it. The original Soviet Union, for geopolitical strategy, $2 billion a year to keep Vietnam going. But by 1985 the Soviet Union is almost out of pants. Who cares if you have a belt in Vietnam? To save yourself, the Vietnamese government in 1981 and 1985 I made 2 consecutive prices payroll currency clearance, trying to straighten out prices all at once through executive orders. These 2 failed attempts directly led to the local currency credit bankruptcy. Prices can triple in a day. Copy Soviet homework. It looks like it's going to kill Vietnam itself. The second one, breakthrough and loneliness at the bottom. When the upper echelons go to a dead end, the fire of salvation is ignited from the bottom. Back in 1976, Yeung Phu Township, Ha Phang City, northern Vietnam, farmers risked going to jail. They began to distribute the land among households. Cooperative sign on the surface privately. It pays enough for the country, the rest is yours. This kind of move is similar to Shaogang village in China. It was an absolute political taboo at the time. Jin Yu, the township cadre, in charge, so he was severely disciplined. But the farmers preferred the centimeter deduction. And I'm very protective of this delivery model. The turnaround came in 1979. Monthly payment. Elder, then chairperson of the State Council Long March, after hearing about this go to the countryside for inspection in person, he was surprised to find the output per mu of grain in those illegal villages. It is actually twice as high as the standard cooperative. At the same time, south of Ho Chi Minh City, another disobedient person is also acting. His name is Nguyen Van Linh. This person was born in 1915, spent time in a French prison, 6 years of revolution as secretary of the Ho Chi Minh City Party Committee, witnessed the Jiao Biao of the southern economy. He kept it from the top brass in Hanoi. Did a bold thing in the old factory, secretly launched a special economic zone-style pilot. He allowed companies to source their own raw materials, autonomous pricing, self-financing, even break the dead wage, and give bonuses to workers out of Vietnam in the 1980s. That's called giving capitalism the green light. 5 monthly payments in 1982. 67-year-old Nguyen Van Linh, due to root issues damaged by then General Secretary Lee, kicked out of the Politburo. Everyone thinks the political life of the old revolutionary is over, but Nguyen Van Linh did not back down. He plays the marginalized. Ho Chi Minh continued to keep those pilots. He knew all too well that this was the only way to save Vietnam. A few years later, when the Vietnamese economy hit rock bottom, Nguyen Van Linh took the Long March to visit Haiphong that year. Please come to Ho Chi Minh City. 2 white-haired old men walked around the vibrant pilot factory. The Long March left a message. Your path is right. That moment, the gears of Vietnam's national transportation have finally been pinched into one new track. Chapter 3. The monthly payment is falling by a few trillion. July 1986. The person who held the highest power died. The hard line is gone. The Long March, who took over as General Secretary, was 79 years old at this time. December of the same year, month, for the 6th National Congress, to be held in Hanoi. This is a time in the history of Vietnam, a watershed meeting. At the meeting, the Long March publicly apologized to the entire Vietnamese people. He frankly admitted that Vietnam's serious crimes committed on the route of economic construction and long-term mistakes, admitting the disaster caused by inflation, admits to ignoring subjective laws. Face this crime summoned countless veteran Vietnamese cadres who have been in uniform for half their lives, tears streaming down my face. This is not political theater. This is a group of revolutionaries. At a moment of national survival, the painful denial of one's own path for the first half of life, then the Long March. Phan Nguyen Tong Lee Deshu's 3 senators took the initiative to retire 71-year-old Nguyen Van Linh, officially promoted to the throne of General Secretary. Vietnam's reform and opening up officially kicked off. Resolution number 10 was officially issued for the monthly supply in 1988, fully established the household contract system. Just 2 years, Vietnam not only solved the problem of food and clothing across the country, it has also become the world's 2nd largest rice exporter. Published to the public at that time, attractive foreign investment law. For the first time, 100% foreign ownership is allowed. The problem of corporate eating is solved. How does the country make money? Vietnam must pay. Citation: prove yourself. From a geopolitical powder keg became a safe place to do business. In 1989, Vietnam officially withdrew its troops from Cambodia. The heaviest financial and diplomatic burden has been shed. In 1990, high-level officials from China and Vietnam met in Trung Do, held a historic secret meeting. The 10-year border confrontation is coming to an end soon. The minefield on the Sino-Vietnamese border was cleared. Vietnam veterans take off their military uniforms, carrying a pole through the Friendship Pass. Start with local rubber and star anise in exchange for Chinese thermos bottles and fabrics. In 1995, this is a pivotal year. Vietnam has not only joined ASEAN more with the former archenemy of the United States, realized normalization of relations, completely breaking the 20-year trade embargo. So far, Vietnam has collected all the tickets. 4th Street stick. China Asia. At the turn of the century, Japan completes high-end upgrade. Asian tigers. It started to shift as labor costs rose. Low-end industry. China's southeast coast has also begun to move. High wealth plus link climbing those who are searching around the world. Transnational capital with cheap labor locked his eyes on the narrow and long piece of Vietnam in the young land. Nike, Adidas, and other clothing, shoe and hat giants were the first to arrive. Then came the army of the electronics industry. Samsung has extensive farmland in Bac Ninh province. Build a super factory. Foxconn, LeShu and Precision is close behind, delivering shells on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Ammunition trolley now filled with smartphones ready to be shipped to Europe and the United States. And sneakers. In recent years, with geopolitical tensions, there is always an anxious voice in the domestic public opinion field. Is Vietnam trying to replace China? Become the new world factory? In fact, just open the map, look at the customs import and export data. You will find the key to Vietnam's economic rise precisely because he is close enough to China. His role has never been replaced. It is China's huge supply chain system extending outward. The current strategies, adopted by multinational capital, in receiving stations, it's called China Plus One. They integrate the core supply chain, high-precision parts manufacturing, and the infrastructure highly demanding links stay in China, and put the last one intensive manual assembly process, put it in Vietnam. Take Samsung phones as an example. Although Samsung produces nearly half of its mobile phones in Vietnam, but these phone screens, batteries, energy, structures, and even packaging boxes. The vast majority still come from Guangdong. China suppliers in Jiangsu. Spare parts are loaded in Dongguan. Take the expressway through Pingshan, Guangxi. It takes more than 10 hours to reach Vietnam directly. The assembly line in Bening factories on both sides of China and Vietnam. It can even be maintained zero inventory turnover at the same pace. What kind of money does Vietnam make in this system? It's meager hard money. A $100 jacket. Pure assembly fee left for the Vietnamese factory probably less than $5. But in the international division of labor, for someone who has been devastated by war, for the countries of the flat earth, and for $5, you can see their return to modern civilization. The only chip to complete the original accumulation. Chapter 5. The furnace of fire. When foreign investment flows in, and it wasn't just prosperity that would follow. And the patrolling of power, land, skin pattern, infrastructure, invited tenders. Foreign companies settle in every link. Smells of money. The low paper salaries of Vietnamese civil servants, and the tremendous approval power they wield formed a fatal contrast. In the 2011 Transparency International Youth Index, Vietnam scored only 29 points out of 112 globally. The business environment was hindered by severe corruption. In 2013, an old man named Softweight decided to declare war on corruption. This person has a deep theoretical foundation. General Secretary from the propaganda front to this anti-corruption campaign, with a murderess named the Furnace. He said something that shocked the world. The stove is hot. Even if you throw any wet firewood in there, it'll burn to ashes. The fire has been burning since 2013, completely reshaped the political ecology of Vietnam. 2013 to 2020, more than 130,000 party members were punished. But what really shocked global public opinion, it is the deepening of the anti-corruption in recent years. Nguyen Xuan Phuc, then president of Vietnam, in early 2023, due to subordinates' strict measures in the COVID-19 epidemic, prevention materials and package base incident. Heavy corruption leads to resignation. This is since Vietnam's reform and opening up. The first national leader to step down. March 2024, the new president of Vietnam, Nguyen Xuan, who is only 53 years old for being involved in the Fukuyama Group case 10 years ago, announced his resignation. Only one more year and 1 month, just 1 month later, April 2024, President of the National Assembly of Vietnam, Nguyen Dinh Huy, also resigned due to the involvement of his assistant. The four carriages of Vietnam's supreme power structure lost most of it in a year and a half. July 2024, 80-year-old Nguyen Phu Trong passed away. Always on the line, the Minister of Public Security in charge of anti-corruption, Surin, takes the baton. After Su Lin came to power, not only does it break the unspoken rule of decent retirement in politics, continue to hold senior officials who have resigned accountable, it has also further increased its focus on the economic field. The investigation and handling of major cases like Zhong My Lan, who shocked the world, Wanshing for group fraud case. Vietnam's Green Lotus Index rose steadily, significant jump in rankings. This is Vietnam's call to foreign investment. Although this land is thin, but the money you earn is stared at the top with knives. Chapter 6. Truth and cruelty are undeniable. Vietnam today. Ho Chi Minh City. The towering landmark tower is neon lit. The price of a cup of specialty coffee. It has caught up with the developed world. Young people riding Honda motorcycles, brushing short videos, enjoy the benefits of globalization. But beneath the surface of prosperity, Vietnam is hitting some impenetrable ceilings. Infrastructure flaws due to the lack of large-scale grid infrastructure and heavy industry chassis. Vietnam's power supply is extremely fragile. The high temperature season of 2023 to 2024, Vietnam's northern industrial zone frequently pulls power lines, led to Foxconn, Samsung, and other foundries were forced to shut down. Foreign investors complain heavy chemicals and the lack of local supply chains. Vietnam has not yet built a complete steel industry chemical foundation. The plastic particles used to make shoes need to be imported. Precision machine tools for making mobile phones need to be imported. Lack of upstream premium capability. As a result, Vietnam's economy is highly dependent on others. The demographic dividend is fading at a young age. But Vietnam's fertility rate is also declining with the development of the economy. Rising labor costs. When wages in Vietnam when the ultimate price-performance ratio is no longer available, are those multinational foundries like migratory birds. Fly to Bangladesh or India without looking back from the devastated jungle battlefield to an indispensable assembly shop in the global supply chain. It took Vietnam nearly 40 years. He is not the next China. It is also incapable of replacing China. His just being pragmatic between the fingers of the giant opened a crack in survival. Every morning millions of young Vietnamese portraits. The tide usually pours into industrial areas. The current of the times propels them forward. Press the sewing machine. Pedal in your hand. Tighten the screws on the assembly line. It's them. It's them. Fighting the economic cycle. The truest portrayal of rewriting the fate of a country. The weak want to change their lives. The first step is never to talk about dignity, but to find a way to live first and stay at the table and finish talking about Vietnam. Summer, we went to a place that was the exact opposite of Vietnam. Road country Costa Rica. Vietnam has not stopped accounting for 30 years. Military spending takes up to 50% of national finances. It has made itself one of the poorest countries in the world. Costa Rica simply disbanded its army. More than 70 years have passed when the entire Central American military junta takes turns. Costa Rica has never fought a single war. There has never been a dictator. GDP per capita is among the highest in Latin America. The world's first forest coverage rate. Happiness index perennially ranks first in the world. A country that doesn't even want guns. Why live better than neighbors with guns? All right, next season. Costa Rica disbanded its army. The country has become a fairy tale. Pay attention. See you next time.